After I was taken, I completely lost my memory. I mistook the leader of the kidnappers for my fiancé and, in a foolish impulse, kissed that cold and unapproachable man, trying to touch him as if he were mine. Despite his absurdly handsome face, his expression was impassive, and he pushed me away. But then my real fiancé, that cruel man I barely remembered, called me with a voice full of contempt, saying that I was dead to the outside world, and that if I had any sense, I'd better come back immediately. The leader of the kidnappers took the phone from my hand and silenced me with a deep kiss, almost leaving me breathless, before responding coldly that I wasn't dead, just having a lot of fun. That drove my fiancé crazy. In the early hours of the morning, he broke into the wedding hall where I was being held, determined to force our wedding night to happen sooner. But nothing went as he expected. The door flew open and Osbert Coral appeared, the heir to the Coral family, known for his authority both in the underworld and among the capital's elite. He threw a coat over me and looked around the room with such intensity that the air seemed to freeze. With eyes full of rage, he spoke as if he weren't asking, "Darling, how dare they touch you? I'll take care of this myself." And then, without hesitation, he pulled out his gun. On the other end of the line, while I begged for help, Rudy, the man who was supposed to protect me, showed only coldness. His voice mingled with the loud music from a bar, and he seemed more concerned about the woman he was with than me. I felt a tightness in my chest. When I told him I had been kidnapped, that it was true, that I wasn't lying, he laughed with contempt, saying that my tricks were outdated, that I had already gotten what I wanted, a body, a contract, but never his heart. The men around me laughed as they held a knife to my throat. I trembled and begged him to say something, anything to make them stop. But he just mocked the ransom demand, offering double to anyone who would help him keep my little show going without bothering him. Even in my desperation, I held on to a glimmer of hope. I asked if he really wasn't coming to save me. On the other end, I heard a woman's soft voice interrupting the conversation. Rudy was too busy for me. When the call ended, only the piercing silence of the warehouse remained. The two men began to argue about my fate as if I were a disposable object. One of them suggested drugging me and sending me straight to the boss who liked women like me. Thin waist, long legs, and talkative, the idea of being handed over to someone unknown, old, cruel, perhaps deformed, made me want to scream. I ran as fast as I could, but 2 legs would never outrun 4. They caught up with me, knocked me down, and knocked me out with a well-aimed blow. I woke up later in an unfamiliar bed. Not knowing how long I had been unconscious, I was wrapped in a blanket. The room plunged into darkness. The sound of footsteps and muffled voices made me hold my breath. The door opened and someone approached. I felt the weight of their presence. Beside the bed, the blanket was lifted and my eyes met his. I had no idea who he was, but his appearance took my breath away. He had an angular face, short, well-groomed hair, marked eyebrows, thin, firm lips, dark skin, and a visible mark on his throat. He was beautiful, but there was something in his eyes, a calm coldness that made it clear he was no ordinary man. His body was strong, with a defined chest and visible muscles. But he looked at me with contempt, as if he didn't know what to do with me. He covered me again, sighed impatiently, lit a cigarette, and made a call while leaning back against the headboard. I remained there, motionless, listening to him ask on the phone where the woman with the malicious look who was lying on his bed had come from. I caught bits and pieces of the conversation and understood that she had been kidnapped after a fall, that my fiancé had been injured, and that now fate had thrown me into that house with no memory whatsoever. When he hung up, I was already struggling to get out from under the blanket. He lifted it again, this time touching my face lightly, as if distracted, and I couldn't resist the provocation. I bit his finger. He let out a whistle of surprise. He said in a calm voice that I was an angry kitten. I bit him again, this time harder. He stared at me, as if trying to understand what he had in his hands. We exchanged glances, and I looked away first, blushing with embarrassment. He mocked my gesture and muttered that he thought I was braver. My face burned, and without thinking, I whispered that maybe it wasn't so impossible between us, that I was adaptable, and that even though he was so strict, he was also absurdly handsome. An embarrassing confession that escaped me in a red whisper. His eyes narrowed with interest, and he asked, in a low, insinuating voice, what exactly I had just said. I repeated it, calling him dear. He laughed through his nose, said his name was Osbert Coral, and seemed surprised by my lack of fear. I explained that if we were already engaged, there was no reason to fear him. He looked at me with contempt and said I was too young. I replied without thinking that he could raise me. Then, his eyes lost their patience for a moment. He said, he didn't raise lazy people. Even so, when I asked him to untie me, muttering that I was uncomfortable, he approached me and released me as if he were unwrapping a package. His hands slid easily over the ropes, brushing my skin. And when I found myself free, I looked down and realized with horror that I was wearing a tiny piece of black lace, something that revealed more than it covered. He looked away, threw me the blanket, and left the room, telling me to rest. Frustration consumed me. How could he be so indifferent? I ran to him, grabbed his wrist, and pulled him on top of me in an impulsive gesture. I wrapped my arms and legs around his neck and kissed him hastily, awkwardly. He tried to resist for a moment, but held my waist so I wouldn't fall, while his other hand gently pushed my face away. We stared at each other, pretending to be shy. I leaned my face close to his. He touched his own lips as if analyzing the kiss. He said that if I didn't know how to kiss, I shouldn't force it, I insisted. Holding his hand and asking him to practice more, he leaned back on the sofa, crossed his legs, and watched me with half-closed eyes. He was wearing a shirt he had given me, but his pants were so long they dragged on the floor. He asked me if I knew how I had ended up there. I said yes, that I had been kidnapped. He just looked at me with that same bored look and said he knew I had hit my head and was a little slow. Sweat dripped down his face, down his temples, sliding down his neck until it disappeared between his defined muscles. There was no trace of fat on his body, just firm lines that stretched and contracted with every movement. His broad back bent and stretched perfectly, and his waist fit harmoniously over his hips. The sweat continued down the contours of his chest and disappeared into areas that only the imagination dared to explore. His tanned skin took on an almost mesmerizing glow in the light of the ring. Each blow he delivered made his opponent stagger. The fair-skinned boy tried to stand his ground, but Osbert dominated him with brutal elegance. Blood trickled slowly from his mouth, and even though he was injured, he insisted on fighting until he fell again. Osbert showed no mercy. He punched him harder, with precision and coldness. It was impossible to look away. His every movement seemed rehearsed, like a violent dance where each gesture carried control and fury. Suddenly, the boy on the ground attempted a surprise attack. I knew Osbert would easily dodge it, but I screamed anyway. The other man became frustrated, coughing up blood and asking ironically why I had interfered. He called me a little beauty. Before he could continue, Osbert glared at him, and he immediately fell silent, covering his mouth. He apologized, clearly afraid, acknowledging his mistake and flirting with me in front of him. He called me by my full name, respectfully, and asked when we had started something. He said he now knew the reason. For my zeal, what kind of luck was Osbert's? A beautiful girl who didn't even blink when she saw him beat another man, but screamed when he was almost taken by surprise. Osbert didn't answer. He walked toward me with steady steps. He was too tall. His shadow enveloped me completely, and his expression, though serious, no longer carried the same harshness as before. A scent of heat, sweat, and something too masculine hit me. I clutched the fabric of my dress, uncomfortable, and couldn't help but look at the red stain on his clothes. He asked why I had come there. It didn't sound like a scolding, but like someone who simply didn't want to see me in that environment. I replied that I just wanted to look, that I was worried. I pretended to be lighthearted, but he didn't even look at me. He said he was fine, and left the ring as if nothing had happened. I tried to follow his steps, saying that the men there were too handsome for me not to come back. When he stopped in front of the bathroom, he turned around, his voice hoarser than usual, and asked if I was coming with him. I blushed. I couldn't answer, but he didn't wait. He closed the door and went in. I left. The place was too hot. Osbert's younger brother, still lying on the floor, was writhing in pain, but he still had the energy to talk. He told me his name, Squirrel, and asked how I knew Osbert. I looked at his face covered in bruises, blood still dripping from the corner of his lips. I wondered if I should call a doctor. I said he looked like he was about to die, but he laughed. He said it was nothing, that Osbert used to get much worse from his father when he was younger. He said that without Osbert, his father would be the next one to beat him. He rested his head in his hands, studying me. He wanted to know what was so special about me. I answered bluntly, I wanted to sleep with Osbert. Squirrel's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He asked what we were talking about. I jumped in fright, pretended it was nothing, and ran away, my heart pounding. Halfway there, I remembered I had left my easel in the living room, since the lighting was better there and Osbert wasn't home. I had taken my things there, but the problem was what I had drawn. Osbert completely naked. When I got there, he already had the notebook in his hands. I ran and tried to grab it, saying that I hadn't drawn it well. He replied calmly that he had already finished looking at it, and was just going to close the notebook. The shame burned so much that I thought I would evaporate right there. He smiled. He said I drew well, but that there were still differences. From reality, I retorted that if he had the courage to pose naked, I would draw him accurately. His eyes sparkled as he closed the notebook. He said my mind was impure. I replied that it was just drawing, not sex. He was silent, then approached me, taking off his shirt, his body still damp from the shower. He asked what pose I wanted. I backed away, hiding my face with my hands, but soon let slip between my fingers that he could sit on the sofa however he wanted. I said in a low voice that if he didn't mind, he could take off his pants too. He replied with a simple, "Okay," and was already fiddling with his belt. I closed my eyes tightly. I peeked through a crack. His eyes were smiling very close to me. If I leaned forward a little, I could kiss him. I turned my face away quickly, frightened. He mocked my courage, asking who had given me permission to stare at a man like that. I said it was against the rules. But then he sat down on the sofa, covered himself with a blanket, and stayed there reading documents. My hand trembled as I tried to draw. Without realizing it, I had grown accustomed to his bed. I had slept there for the last few days. But that night, I was sent to the guest room. I remembered the body I had seen before and, barefoot, I approached his bed. Osbert was fast asleep. I slowly lifted the comforter and lay down next to him. The sky collapsed with thunder. He frowned, turned around, and hugged me. He was shirtless. His warm, firm skin surprised me. I always imagined muscles to be hard. It was impossible to sleep with that feeling. He opened his eyes. He asked if I had already satisfied myself. I said no. He seemed annoyed and asked me impatiently who had let me in. I stuck my head under the comforter and said there was a storm, and I thought he was afraid of the thunder. He closed his eyes, sighed, and whispered for me to go to sleep. I took advantage of the moment and touched his muscles again. I didn't sleep a wink all night, but the next morning he was gone. I believed that our bond had grown stronger after that intimate contact. But no. He avoided any touch. He wouldn't let me hug him or caress him. He even wrapped 3 towels around himself to take a shower. When I tried to get close to him, he pushed me away coldly. On the other hand, I destroyed the kitchen, ruined the flowers in the winter garden, and even broke the shower. He said I needed some time alone to play with myself. He smiled and messed up my hair, but I noticed he was grinding his teeth. I climbed on top of him again. I told him that even though I wasn't good at many things, I was great at my job. I asked him not to move, that I wanted to take his measurements to design a unique outfit for him, a gift from a renowned designer. He pulled my hands away and asked if my family used to touch people like that to take their measurements. I confirmed, without a hint of embarrassment. He asked if he wanted to hit me. Finally, he threatened that if I touched him again, he would break my hands. He said he had an appointment with a doctor that night, who could reattach them. I took his hand and placed it on my chest. I told him he was scary, but I could feel my heart racing. I didn't expect him to actually take me to the doctor. Woodert laughed when he saw me, joking that Osbert was finally blossoming late in life. A brute who raised a delicate girl. I was embarrassed. Osbert told the doctor to stop fooling around and asked for the diagnosis. It wasn't serious. It had been a blow that caused temporary amnesia. According to him, with some memories of the past and good humor, I might get better. When the doctor was leaving, Osbert asked for something else. Medicine for the scar. I was shocked. He remembered. In my family, no one ever cared if I fell, hurt myself, or even broke a bone. I looked at Osbert. He was leaning against the door frame, watching everything in silence. When our eyes met, he looked away, turned around, and left. After the doctor left, I thanked him. Osbert beckoned me with his finger. I lowered my head. He checked to see if I had applied the ointment. He said it was fine. For the first time, I looked at Osbert closely. His face was intense. When he was serious, he looked dangerous. When angry, he was frightening. And when he smiled, although I had never seen him do so, it must have been a rare sight. He tilted his head. He asked what I was looking at. I just said thank you. Then I kissed him on the lips and ran up the stairs. For a moment, he stood still, scratched his nose with his finger, and discreetly curved his lips. It seemed like an illusion. After that moment, he returned to his usual cold self. He stopped coming home. He was away for over a week. I enjoyed the time alone. No work, just ordering food and binge-watching series in the village. Mia, my best friend, sent me a message asking why I had disappeared. I told her that Rudy, the man I once loved, was at the bar every day. I sent her a photo of a man holding a girl, wine dripping down his shirt. Mia thought it was some new waiter. I replied that it was Rudy Green, and that now I had good taste. I sent her a photo I took secretly of Osbert undressing. Mia was shocked. I said he looked like a living sculpture. I replied proudly. My new fiancé. I was happy with my photos when Osbert returned. Drunk, leaning on another man, a fierce guy who, when he saw me, stammered, calling me Miss Birch. I stared. It was obvious he had heard about me. The man accompanying Osbert seemed uncomfortable with my presence, muttering that he had just had too much to drink at a social event and that I could leave soon, as he would take care of him. But I just interrupted him, saying it wasn't necessary. I threw Osbert onto the sofa with some difficulty, and he settled down with his neck and jaw aligned in a gentle curve, the ceiling light highlighting his throat with that small dark mark that moved as he breathed. His jacket was open, the first 3 buttons of his shirt unbuttoned, revealing the discreet outline of his pectoral muscles. The bottom of his shirt hung out of his pants, creating a carefree look. His long legs, wrapped in well-fitting pants, were spread apart naturally, his feet resting on the sides of the coffee table. Osbert rested for a few minutes, then opened his eyes and stared at me with a hoarse voice. He asked why I was still there, and his tone sounded like a push. He reached for a cigarette, put it between his lips, but was too uncoordinated to light it. I took the initiative and held his hand, offering to help him find his lighter. He stopped and looked at me with a mischievous expression. I took a deep breath, gathered my courage, and sat on his lap, with one leg on each side. Without saying a word, I searched his jacket pockets and then his pants pockets. Without success. But with that movement, his clothes became even more disheveled. It was rare to see him in a suit. At first glance, he looked like an elegant executive. But looking again, he looked more like a beast disguised as a human. He smiled dangerously, and my hand slipped from his shoulder to his chest. The firm, tense muscles under his shirt were provocative. My fingers touched the buttons, and I began to undo them one by one. He didn't stop me. I commented on the coat I had made for him, pointing to where it hung on the wall. Long, black, with discreet embroidery, it seemed tailor-made for him. I said it was beautiful. In response, he took 2 pink diamond earrings out of his pocket. They were a rarity. Created by a famous designer in a moment of passion, Osbert scoffed, saying that only we women cared about such excesses, that no one wanted them in his house, so he gave them to me to play with. I found that hard to believe. After all, he had changed his entire routine just to make sure I got my deliveries, even assigning a scowling security guard just for that. He looked around the room full of packages with an air of surrender. I remembered I was still looking for the lighter. He looked at the mess of his own clothes and gave me a burning look. He said I had left him practically naked. What was I thinking? The alcohol softened his expression. There was desire in his eyes. I took the cigarette from his lips and said that kissing was more fun. As I leaned in, he held the back of my neck, and that's how our first real kiss happened. His lips were dry but soft. His teeth nibbled my lower lip. He told me to open my mouth, and when I ran out of air, he pulled away briefly to let me breathe, calling me a good girl. Before I could compose myself, he pulled me back again, his fingers intertwined in my hair. My hands rose without thinking, to his shoulders, opening his shirt even more. I felt something pressing discreetly between us. I reached out my hand, curious and uninhibited. Then my cell phone vibrated with an untimely message. The screen lit up. Rudy Green. The message was straightforward, asking me to go to a bar. Osbert saw it. His expression became silent. Then he pulled away. He said he was going to take a shower and that I should rest. I tried to hold his hand, but he pulled it away firmly. I said goodnight. I stood there, staring at the screen. Why did I still have that number? I deleted the message. Annoyed, Osbert threw his jacket on the sofa and started unbuttoning his shirt as he walked. I followed him. I said that my friend said Rudy was just a jerk, and that he wasn't mine. Of course not. When Osbert reached the bathroom door, he turned around and said I could leave now. I refused. I leaned against the door frame and asked, with a straight face, if I could help him in the shower. His eyes darkened, and the door closed quickly. I took advantage of my height and slipped inside before he could lock it. I said it was dangerous for someone drunk to take a shower alone. I said I would cover his eyes. He smiled crookedly and pointed his chin toward a wall. Stay there, facing away, and don't you dare peek. I positioned myself as he told me, but the sound of clothes being removed behind me set me on fire. His shirt fell over my head. It smelled like him mixed with soap. The shower water started running. I felt the heat of the steam envelop me. And when I looked ahead, the wall was reflective. I could see Osbert's every move. Broad shoulders, slim waist, his entire perfect physique reflected. He ran his hand through his hair, water dripping in jets, revealing even more of his body. I stood still, embarrassed and mesmerized. He laughed, saying I couldn't even handle that. I replied, pretending it was no big deal, that I had seen it before. The sound of water stopped and I realized, too late, that he was approaching. A wet hand pulled me firmly. He pressed me against the sink, his body still wet. He held me by the waist so I wouldn't fall. He was only wearing a towel wrapped around his hips. He wrapped his arms around me, leaning his body against mine. His hair was dripping and his eyes were burning. He whispered my name and bit his lip before asking whose body I had seen. I blushed. He grabbed my wrist and guided it under the towel. He stared at me with desire, squeezing my fingers against him. He told me to touch him. I woke up in his bed the next day. He was already gone. I sat up, my whole body aching. We hadn't gone all the way, but it was intense. Then I noticed the stain on the bed. My period had come. I panicked. I was thinking about what to do when there was a knock at the door. A beautiful woman with wavy hair and sophisticated clothes. As soon as she saw me, her voice rose. She asked who I was and why. I was there dressed like that. I explained that my clothes were dirty and asked her the same question. Who was she? She said she was Osbert's fiancé. I laughed. If she was his fiancé, why didn't she know where the sanitary pads were? I told her I needed one urgently. She looked confused. She pushed my hand away and said that no women lived there. So there was no such thing in the house. It was obvious she was making it up. I made a sad face. She stared at me until she realized who I was. She said my name. And then Osbert arrived. The woman ran to him and hugged him. He calmly pushed her away and asked what she was doing there. She said she was his fiancée. He denied it. He said they had broken up 3 months earlier, before he even met me. The girl was devastated. She asked if he was with someone else because of me. He confirmed it, firmly. He told her to leave. When I came back from the bathroom, she was already gone. I asked who Rudy Green was. Why was everyone talking about him? Osbert pinched my cheek, asking if I cared. I said I was just curious. He muttered that Rudy was a homewrecker and that he didn't want to hear that name anymore. He picked me up, put a hot water bottle on my belly. He asked if I was in pain. I said I was just worried about staining the bed, that I would wash it. I imagined him rubbing the sheets with a cigarette in his mouth and laughed. He was kinder than ever. I hugged and kissed him. I told him not to tease me. He kissed me back, leaving me weak. Then the phone rang again. It was Rudy. He called me by my full name, yelling that I had deleted his number and that I should stop this nonsense and come back. I recognized his voice. I said I was fine. He yelled, furious, asking if there was another man with me. Osbert kissed me more intensely and answered for me, saying that I wasn't dead, that we were having fun. Rudy hung up. Did you hear that? He was the one who destroyed our relationship. On the other end of the line, Rudy threw his cell phone and went straight to my family's house. I was still unsure. So I asked Mia. She hesitated. She said Rudy was worthless, that he had ignored me during our engagement and was always surrounded by other women, that I was blind, in love with him. But that now everything had changed. I was paralyzed. That was my former fiancé. But who was Osbert Coral then? A lover? A stranger? A protector? Or just someone who took care of me for a whole week while I was vulnerable? Osbert ran his hand tenderly through my hair and said that his work commitments were almost sorted out, that I deserved to get out, get some exercise, and that he would take me with him. I replied provocatively, saying that I wasn't tired of doing nothing yet. He laughed, but pinched my belly lightly, suggesting that I had already enjoyed myself enough. I went to get ready. I chose a short skirt, simple leather shoes, and the pink diamond earrings he had given me. Osbert wore an elegant overcoat with that imposing posture that made everything about him seem in place. Being from the capital, he knew all the interesting places. But without thinking much, he took me to the mall. Although I already had a lot of jewelry, he said there were always new designs. Without realizing it, I had already chosen a few more. I was showing him a tie when I saw someone who took my breath away. Rudy Green. He took a while to recognize me. After all, the girl who used to follow him everywhere was now walking with another man, well-dressed, confident, radiant. I hid behind Osbert, who held my hand tightly. Rudy approached, demanding explanations. Saying that we were still engaged, Osbert replied coldly. He said that since Rudy had abandoned me, I was no longer his fiancée. Now I was his, Rudy scoffed. He brought up the engagement party, tried to embarrass me, called it all a scandal. But Osbert responded sharply. He said it was up to me, whether I wanted to or not. I squeezed his hand back. I looked Rudy in the eyes and said he had nothing to do with my life anymore. No matter what had happened in the past, our bond was broken. Rudy insisted, saying I would regret it. But there was no more regret in me, only embarrassment. I tried to leave, but he grabbed my wrist. He demanded that I choose. Osbert intervened, pulling Rudy away forcefully. If it weren't out of respect for the law, he would have broken his arm right there. We got back in the car. I asked Osbert to tell me the truth. He hesitated, then explained that the kidnapping was the work of subordinates without his consent, that there was mistrust between the Coral, Green, and Birch families, and that I had ended up with him by chance. He said that even though he had other interests, he never wanted to hurt me, that if I wanted to leave, he would let me. But his hand was shaking. His eyes, for the first time, were empty. I knew I could have left at any moment, that I had never been prevented from doing so. I stayed there because I wanted to. I told him I didn't intend to go back. Not to Rudy, not to the Birch family. With them, I had no freedom. I was an object for alliances. With Osbert, I could be myself. I took his face in my hands. I told him that now I just wanted to tease the man I loved. He kissed me hard. I settled into his lap, and our bodies met in the small space of the car. He stopped, saying it wasn't the place. I replied that it was a long way back. He sat me down on the seat and said he knew a place nearby. He drove as if he were in a hurry. When we entered the room, his expression was one of restrained desire. He said that now I couldn't run away. Even though I had seen that body before, I blushed when he took off his shirt. He kissed me, wiped my tears, and whispered that I should cry if I wanted to. Outside, the night was silent, the moon hidden behind the clouds. In another corner of the city, Rudy was drowning himself in drink. Some woman was nestling in his lap, but when she called him love, he pushed her away. He said only one person could call him that. He told everyone to leave. His childhood friend tried to console him with more alcohol, but Rudy could only think about getting me back, about taking me by force, breaking the glass. He left determined. That's how they kidnapped me again. A walk at dusk ended with me unconscious. Rudy drugged me. I woke up in a bed, untied, but locked in. I tried to escape. Rudy appeared. He said I had always been his, that he was just accepting me back. He said that when I remembered everything, I would love him again. But I already remembered, and I didn't love him. Those memories came back. But they no longer had any value. I told him they were just obsessions from the past. Rudy screamed, desperate, trying to kiss me by force. I screamed, need him, used everything Osbert had taught me. I broke a lamp over his head. He fell. I found his cell phone and called Osbert. Just hearing his voice made me cry. I told him Rudy had kidnapped me. He said he already knew. He was on his way. When he arrived, he found me hiding in the bathroom. He wrapped me in a coat and wiped my tears. He asked if he should kill him. His eyes were cold. A single signal was enough for his men to overpower Rudy. He was terrified. The blows he received were precise, painful, but not fatal. Osbert shielded me from the sounds and took me home. Days later, Rudy was arrested. The Green family was in ruins. Jose visited me with a swollen face. He said he had saved a woman from being kidnapped and was beaten by her afterwards, but that it was worth it. He asked when Osbert and I were getting married. Osbert held my hand. He said he wanted to ask me to marry him the following month, with a gift. 2% of the Coral family shares. All as a sign of respect. I refused to let it go to my father. I said I would rather give it to my sister after our mother died. She was the one who took care of me. She had always been strong, beautiful, repressed, trapped in that family. With Osbert by her side, things would be different. He promised to meet her. He said he wanted to see if she was as beautiful as the one who had beaten him. Jaws laughed, even with the pain on his face. The next day, Osbert came to my house. My father was furious. Osbert imposed his presence. My sister confronted him, saying that if anything happened to me, he would have to deal with her. He assured her that he wouldn't let anything hurt me. Jaws stood quietly in a corner, pretending not to exist. Osbert moved my studio to a central area, placing me in the heart of the city before my father controlled me, but I still graduated abroad. Now, with Osbert, my career as a designer was gaining momentum, but in the midst of so much work, I ended up neglecting Osbert. One night, he hugged me from behind. He said he needed me. I asked him not to move. He pulled the chair out from under me and hid under the table. I asked him what he was doing. He said he wouldn't bother me. He just wanted to be close. When I felt his hot mouth on my skin, I knew I couldn't trust him anymore. My hands were shaking. Osbert raised his wet fingers and asked in a hoarse voice if I would wear the dress I had designed especially for that night.